Hello and welcome to the ISM Rochester April membership meeting. We would like to make this an interactive program, so we want to hear from you. So please, you can either raise your hand, take yourself off of mute, or you can put your question or comment in the chat box. But we definitely would like to make this interactive with all of our attendees today. At this point, I'd like to turn the program over to our chapter president, Leanna Aerosol.
Thanks, Kathy. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining the membership meeting today. This is our final membership meeting for 2023. Can't believe it. Next month is ISM World Annual Conference, so we're hoping that you either join in person or join virtually, but I'm sure it's going to be a great event. Today, our speaker is Amanda. Amanda, I'm not going to pronounce the last name. You can do it when it's your turn. I'm sorry. And the topic she'll be presenting on is practical techniques to succeed in digital transformation. I'm now going to turn it over to Amanda.
I appreciate it. And thank you everyone for being here. And thanks for that very kind introduction. And Kathy, thanks for the introduction to speak today. So as mentioned, this will be interactive because I have some questions for you all. So, and I need some of your insights to help me out here. So hopefully we can have a good dialogue today. But so let me go ahead and share my screen and get this presentation rocking and rolling. And that's not the right one. Hold on. We're going to go over here. We're going to go into presentation mode. Can everyone see my screen? The famous question.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome, awesome. And since we have a small group today, feel free to just take yourself off of mute if you have a question or a comment or an answer to one of my questions. But as mentioned, we're going to be talking about how to create change within an organization. And I want to kind of level set with everyone here today. There's big change, like a digital transformation, or there's little change, which we call lowercase change with the C. And that's like your day-to-day activities where you might see something that needs to be improved, and how do you sell that in effectively into the organization and then actually make the change. So we'll be talking about both of those today. A little bit about me, just so you know where I'm coming from. I'm actually a procurement person through and through. I started in procurement. My first role was a buyer, but I then spent 16 years in procurement doing all kinds of different projects, leading large-scale change. SAP deployments, Coupa implementations, Ariba implementations. I led the merger of Kraft Heinz from a procurement perspective. I've also acquired businesses and did a lot of outsourcing and insourcing and opening new properties. So the big kind of I would say theme throughout all of those different projects was change. And the projects that went really well was because of really great change strategies. The projects that didn't go so well was because of really poor change strategies. But I do a lot outside of the day-to-day as I transitioned into Wonder Services, which you'll hear a little bit more about here in a second. I do a lot of activities within procurement. My number one goal is to make sure procurement as a profession is successful at the end of the day. We play such a vital role in our overall economies, wherever you're located, not only in the micro economy of our businesses that we support, but the macro economies too. So I've done stuff like created the first ever women's global organization for procurement called GWPP. I was also the founding member of the ISM Thought Leadership Council at the national level. Do a lot of public speaking like I'm here today, and I write a bunch of different articles and blogs throughout the industry. So that's a little bit about my background. I'm happy to be here today. But a little bit about Wonder Services. So I was in procurement, and then I saw that there was such a gap between what was happening with your large scale changes, how those investments were finally being made within procurement, but the ROI obtainment was only around 30% on average across the industry. So I was thinking to myself, I could be just noticing this and trying to make change within my own organization. However, I think I could be much more effective if I go out there on my own and try to help as many companies be successful in their large scale changes. So Wonder Services was born 4 years ago. We just had our 4-year anniversary. And we specialize in creating change and user adoption for any type of large scale change in your company. Our specialty, though, is in digital transformation. So this is the last time you're going to be hearing about Wonder Services, because this is not about me today, but I wanted to just kind of level set about where I'm coming from and the expertise that we have. The rest of this conversation is going to be about you and providing some really practical tips around how to create change. So we're going to focus in 2 areas today. Getting to yes, because getting to yes is actually creating change in itself, and it's a struggle for so many of us, whether it's, again, large scale change or kind of your day-to-day level, and then getting to results. So think about that 2 ways today that we're going to be looking at this. So here's the first interactive point. You guys are all procurement professionals, I think, that are on the call today. Correct me if you're not, but you hear probably pitches almost every single day from sales folks. So if you reflect back on what makes a really great sales pitch, I would love to understand what that is from your perspective. So what makes a really great sales pitch?
For me, this is Leanna. For me, I rely a lot on the connection with the person. If we have the relationship and they're trying to sell me something, I'm more willing and able to listen
Yep.
and be more
Yeah,
open-minded to it.
I agree, that sense of trust and, like, I don't know, like if somebody is being super fake,
Yeah.
I feel like I can't trust them. So, and this is
Yeah.
Michelle.
If fake or canned, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just like same old, same old.
Yeah, like they're reading me like a speech or a
Like a script.
talk track or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I love it. What else? And then I'll tell you guys a story here real quick about the canned piece of that conversation.
Like
I'd say
honestly,
making it relevant to my organization.
Okay.
Just don't give me a generic sales pitch.
All right. Anything else? Okay. This was really good. I love it. Every time I ask this question, I actually get slightly different answers. In fact, like that connection and relationship, I don't think has come up on any other conversation that I've had when I ask this question. So really, really like that ad. I'll tell you a quick story about going back when I was the vice president of procurement at MGM. I remember sitting in a conference room when we actually were in the office. A conference room with the kind of neon lights going on, or like the fluorescent lights, and kind of a gray surrounding. And there was this guy up at the front that was pitching us, sales guy. And I wasn't paying attention to anything that he was saying because it was so canned. What I was actually trying to do was guess when the logo slide came up. Like, the logo splash slide that everyone has. So I was trying to guess what slide was coming next in his pitch. Was probably not what he was intending that presentation.
we lost your sound, Amanda.
I think I just lost you guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Yeah, now we can.
I love the joy of working from home.
Right.
Connected to my husband's Bluetooth. So, but anyway, I hope you heard that story. It was really funny. I don't remember what he was pitching, but that was a good example of that kind of canned approach. So many of the sales pitches that you probably see are not the greatest. And what I learned as I transitioned from procurement into more of a sales role, because I have to sell my own company, is that there was so much that I didn't know as a procurement professional that I wish I would have. So part of this is kind of reflecting on my own journey and hopefully sharing some of those tips with you today. So the question for you is, if you think about what makes a really good business case, that it's not canned, that it reflects your own personal needs and within your business, that there's a connection and trust there. Are you using those same techniques for your business case development? So if you've ever been challenged, even if it's just trying to go to your leadership and saying, I want to change this small thing day to day, or it's a big business case that requires investment, are you taking those same good sales tactics and building it into your business case? I know I wasn't. And so there's some things that are like little tiny tips that you can do to help you get there. So here's another question for you. What is one of the greatest stories, maybe a movie, that has ever been told in your particular opinion? Can you give me a really good story or movie?
That's a really hard question.
That was a hard question.
Yeah. I don't know.
What's a really good story? Any takers? I usually get a lot of creativity at this point. Okay. How about, let me throw, does anyone know the story, like the original 6 movies of Star Wars? You guys all watched it?
Yes.
Yeah?
Some of them.
And if you have, okay, then I'll use that as the example here. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold too, so sorry if I cough every once in a while. Okay, who is the hero in Star Wars?
Luke Skywalker.
Luke Skywalker. Again, the original Star Wars, not the new stuff. Good. Okay, so who could be the guide?
Yoda.
Yoda. Great answers. That's exactly what I was looking for. So the difference, if you guys can feel the difference between Yoda and Luke Skywalker in that story, we're going to be talking a little bit about that here over the next couple of minutes. And the recommendation, what makes a really, really great sales pitch is if you can tell an effective story, but not an effective story about you being the hero. You need to be the guide. So think of yourself as Yoda in every situation where you're trying to get alignment and agreement around what your recommendation is all about. So I'll give you an example that usually resonates with quite a few people. So let's say that you need to hire some individuals within your team, and you need to go to the CFO to get approval for that. So there's one example of a conversation that would go something like this. Hi, Mr. CFO or Mrs. CFO. I need to have more resources on my team so I can accomplish X, Y, and Z. Okay. This is how I used to do it in my organizations. It was really about the reason why I need to have these resources and how it would benefit my team. Do you think that's being a guide or a hero in that situation? And that's a rhetorical question. Let me give you another example around how that conversation could go down. Let's say I walk into the CFO's office. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. CFO. You need to have these resources so that you can accomplish the next big thing that's on your strategy and radar. Can you see the difference between those two conversations?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you are a guide, the story becomes less about you and more about enabling the other person to be the hero. So by changing just that little thing in the conversation, it can totally change the game around how you are getting alignment internally with your ideas. I'm going to pause there because that's one of the really big takeaways of this conversation today. Are there questions about that, or even examples that you're dealing with right now that where this situation could benefit you? Just want to make sure that that's resonating with everyone.
There. I'm currently putting together a slide deck for one of the leadership programs that I'm in for my company.
Mhm.
And we need to put together like a project that can help the company. So, you know, part of it is getting leadership's buy-in.
Yeah.
And so this is absolutely like the timing is perfect on this. So this is going to be very useful to me because this is exactly what we need to do, you know, in order for our project to be, you know, accepted and put into use,
Mm-hmm.
you know, at our company.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it is like a sales pitch, although
It
I'm
is.
not like, I just want their buy-in.
Yeah. Well, but you're selling an idea, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, some people sell services, some people sell products, some people sell ideas, but you're still selling.
That's a good point.
So do a gut check, Michelle, as you're going through and preparing that business case. Prepare it like you would naturally. Keep some of this stuff in mind. And then once you get it set, review it and see if it's about you or if it's about the leadership.
That's perfect. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yep. I actually designed an entire website and realized that it was all about me and not about the customer, and we had to redo it all. Right?
That's a good tip. Like that'll stay with me forever.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
The other arch of how you tell a story is important. So the bubbles here on this slide is all about how do you structure your pitch to make sure that you're telling a story versus just having a bunch of talking points. And this comes from Build a Story Brand by Donald Miller. I would highly recommend if you have not read that book. It was like game changing for me. But the way that any good story is kind of laid out, and you can go back to your favorite movie and see if it follows this kind of path. But the first thing that usually happens alongside of kind of character introduction is identifying the problem and why it's important. Okay. So right up front, when you're building a business case, if you don't do that well, the whole rest of the story is not going to unfold correctly. So make sure you truly understand what that problem is, not what your problem is, but what your hero's problem is. Paint the picture of the future. What could the future be if you solve that problem? Don't talk about specifics, but it's almost like you're going through and talking about like, can you imagine if, and answering that question. So if you can paint that picture, that kind of sets the foundation of people starting to get their minds around what you are trying to pull together. Then what you do is you describe the solution in a little bit more detail. So this is almost like the map as a guide of showing the hero how they can get to that future state. Outlining the benefits. So if you can get to that future state, what are some more of those tangible benefits that they can understand and really are almost at a practical level? It's not like the big future state level. It's at a more tangible level benefit. And then the last one is, as the guide, you need to show that there's confidence in your experience that you are the appropriate guide to get them there. So providing some sort of confidence like, hey, we know that 4 other companies have been through this journey and this is what they're doing and how they got there. Or I've done this in the past, in my past experience at a previous job, and this is how we got there. Anything that can provide confidence that this will be achieved as you as the guide is how you would kind of end that storyline. Okay, so this is a great outline. As soon as I started using this within my own business, it was like we were having better conversations. It was more focused on the problem for the hero in the room. And it was a total game changer. Okay. So make sure, A, that you're the guide and not the hero, and that you put the hero at the forefront of everything that you do, and that you tell an effective story is the second thing. And if there's a chat, I can't see the chats. Did someone chat a question? Kathy or?
No, you're good.
Okay, perfect.
Mhm.
All right. So the other thing when it comes to putting together, particularly for digital transformation, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because not all change is digital. But I do want to point out that when you're thinking about preparing for a large sea change, that you really need to have a comprehensive view of the program. So if you think about it as a guide, you're up on a mountaintop looking down over the entire project. These are typically the 8 different things that need to be focused on when it comes to any large scale change. So often people kind of get focused in on that tech, but they forget everything else here, and that becomes problematic, not only for the project itself if it does get approved, but it's often led to people not getting their projects approved because we're not taking a comprehensive look at what needs to be done. So that's just a little bit of a reminder if you're trying to drive forward a digital change. Make sure that you're looking at the entire scope of the project. All right, here's another thing that was a complete mind shift for me, and I think it will probably help you too, is know your influencers. So I'm sure a lot of you are on social media today, and you probably follow some influencers out there. And if you're not on social media, hopefully this example will still resonate with you. But influencers on social media are there to drive different decisions that you are making. So they're there to help influence change in your buying behaviors or how you dress or, the different things that you might be watching on TV. So they're there to change your behavior. There's actually now, I've been told by my team, anti-influencers who are trying to influence you not to follow influencers, which I think is kind of funny. But if you take that same kind of thought process that's happening in the social media world and apply it to your businesses, there are naturally influencers in your business who are doing the exact same thing within your organizations. They might not be paid by big brands out there, but they're doing the same work. So when you think about your organizations, who are those people who are going to influence the organization to adapt your change or not adapt your change? And then how are you strategically bringing them along? This was a huge gap for me, and I'll give you a quick story. So when I was at MGM, we were deploying a very, very large scale change. Part of that change was a Coupa implementation. And we had, I had a peer of mine who was over a very influential part of the business that we needed to have engaged for our Coupa implementation to be successful. Well, at the very beginning, I had conversations with her. She was lovely. She was engaged. She had a lot of influence in the organization, but she was a supporter. And unfortunately, what I did, because I didn't know this trick, is that I was like, well, she's going to support this. It's all going to be good. And I never kept her engaged. Well, what happened was she moved into another role, and that other role was focused on deploying a new ERP system, at which point she decided that we shouldn't be going on Coupa, we should be going onto an ERP. And she started meeting with all the finance people across the organization, drumming up all kinds of not so great things about our Coupa implementation, which were either somewhat valid or not valid at all, but they were still getting surfaced, and it caused a lot of issues for our deployment. Now, what I don't want to happen is the same thing to happen to you. You really need to know who those influencers are, where they stand on your project, and then you need to keep them engaged. And the way that you keep them engaged is you meet with them, you feed them talking points, you ask them for advice, you ask them to go talk to other people who are influential in making decisions in their company. So there's all kinds of ways to engage them, but they need to be engaged. Now, I want to be clear on one point here. Influencers are not just executives within an organization, and they're also not just your boss, okay? A lot of times you can create an environment where maybe your boss needs to decide on something that you want to achieve. However, he or she's kind of on the fence. You can work influencers around your boss to feed them information, get their alignment. And so therefore you're creating an environment where it's not just you with this idea, it's a bunch of other people with this idea that are now influencing your quote unquote decision maker, your leader on this decision. Doesn't work 100% of the time, but it gives you a lot better chance to getting that decision made. Influencers can also be day-to-day. Most of my most powerful influencers are people in accounts payable, if you're thinking P2P, in accounts payable or in the buying roles. They know their stuff. If there's people on those teams that don't buy into your change will not be bought into. So you just need to know who those people are. And then to understand where they stand, you need to ask open-ended questions. And really understand what's motivating them to accept this change. In my example of the woman who changed roles into ERP, that was the biggest gap, because all of a sudden her incentives and what was motivating her completely changed, and I was not on top of it. So know your influencers, do that right out of the gate as you are trying to prepare a recommendation, a proposal, a business case. You need to know who those influencers are and get them engaged early on. Now, another book that I highly, highly recommend, not only because of this, but because of negotiations, Ask for More by Alexandra Carter. She's phenomenal. If you're on LinkedIn, follow her on LinkedIn. Absolutely an amazing woman. She not only talks about the power of influencers and how you get them engaged, but she also talks a lot about negotiation in her book. So I think it's a win-win for procurement professionals to read it. Okay. Questions about influencers, or have you guys had similar situations or anything else that I can help you out with on the topic of influencers? I'll take a pause right here.
You had mentioned earlier about Ariba, and
Yes.
I'm on the Center of Excellence team for Ariba implementation. So
Yeah.
I have to influence a lot of the organizations to buy into Ariba, and it's been very difficult, but we're getting there. So having the ability to influence without authority and just influencing in general is huge.
It is. And it is. So having been through so many technology deployments, like what you were just mentioning on Ariba, it is one of the most missed things in a change management strategy. People will talk about stakeholders, which is just a list of executives. Most of the time, they'll talk about communications, they'll talk about it training, but the biggest gap is not understanding your influencers. So if you're doing that, kudos to you, because it will take you much further along than the majority of those digital implementations. Okay. All right, moving on. Okay, so that was the section on getting your business case put together. So let's talk a little bit about getting results, because it's really two-sided. Most people don't even get to the point to implement, but if you do get to the point of implementation, there are a lot of techniques to use, as was just mentioned, around change management and making sure that you're getting the user adoption that you are wanting. So here's the bad news. I'm going to start with some bad news on this section. Here's the challenge is that most large change initiatives don't succeed. In fact, 66% of them fail. And this has been constant. That stat has been basically steady state or flat for the last 10 years. Which means about 30%, 33% of the these initiatives actually succeed in gaining the ROI that was projected, okay? There's also a lot of money being wasted. Almost 70% of the project money is being wasted. And then we do have a gap of expertise. Leading change is a very different skill typically than leading day-to-day operations. And we have a bit of a knowledge gap within organizations in general around how to do this effectively. So that's the bad news. And this is why I actually started Wonder Services when I started seeing some of these results. So why do you think it's so challenging once you're in a large scale change situation? Why do you think it's such a challenge to get to results? Anyone have any ideas?
I think it's a challenge because you have to influence not only the influencers, but a larger group.
I think some people hate change. So it's really hard to, get people to change when they just think it might not be working, but it's harder to implement something new and get everybody's buy-in. So, you face resistance to that and apathy, I think. Like they just don't care.
Oh yeah, and you get situations where it's like, oh, this change is just it's like the change of the day.
Yeah, like the change just for change sake.
Yes, yeah.
Like people get burnt out on it. Like where in my group, there's changes left and right, and some of it is like, just why? But
yep,
you have to roll the punches.
Yeah. Now, Michelle, just because you were speaking last, how many employees estimate in your organization?
In my organization at Labella, there's about, I think there's 14 or 1,500 now. But the client that we support, and we're kind of co-located with our client, is, they're all over the place. So, utility, so there's a ton.
Yeah.
So
just think about all of those individuals. I'm going to share a little bit of a personal story here. So my daughter is 11, and we were potentially going to move a couple of months ago, and we found a house, and the house was gorgeous. Like it was perfectly laid out for our family, had everything that we were looking for, was in our price point. I was like super jazzed because I didn't think that we were going to find anything like that in this market. And I live out in Las Vegas, so you probably know the real estate market out here is pretty hot, and it has been for a while. So so I was super excited. So my daughter got into the car and I was like, oh my gosh, Reagan, we're gonna move, and it's such a pretty house. I can't wait for you to see it. And she turned around at me and she said, I don't want to hear anything about it. I don't want to move, and stop talking about it. I am not excited about this. So as a change management professional, of course, what I did was get angry at her, which was not right. I totally got angry. I was like, what are you talking about? Why wouldn't you be excited about this? And I let my excitement for the change override what she was feeling. And it took my husband stepping in to talk about, ask her some questions and understand how she was feeling. And she was not overly comfortable with moving away so far away from her current friends. So this is why I share this simple story, because this is why change is so hard. Each individual has their own experience. They could be burnt out on change. They could have stuff going on in their home. They could have other changes in previous roles that were similar to this that didn't go so well. They could be a huge fan of the change. So everyone has a different perspective. And when you're talking about thousands of people that you need to move through this change, it is extremely challenging to get down to the level of what's in that individual person's mind about this change. Now, there's techniques that we're going to be talking about where you can get closer, but that's really what makes change so hard. It's an individual choice at the end of the day of that individual is going to move forward with adopting those changes. So here's what I recommend you do, and this is what we do with our clients, but that you can do this yourselves too. It really focusing on 3 different areas of change. Communication and training, I'm not going to focus on all that much because that's pretty standard. Like people know that they need to communicate. Although I will say for communication, don't believe that an email will change people. Okay. So often when we walk into organizations, they're like, yeah, we sent out 3 emails and nobody followed along with the change. It's like, well, no, communication is not about an email blast. Communication is about creating opportunities to truly engage with someone else, to have a dialogue. It's either one-on-one or it's one-to-many, or it is an email at times, but it's not, emails are not your main point of a communication plan. It should be kind of a supplement or a summary of something that was already discussed in a different forum. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about communication. Training, some people like to do online e-learning. I think personally, that's also not how people learn. You need to have other ways of engaging people, whether in a short format or in a longer live session, where you can truly have that interaction with individuals. Now, outside of that, the one big area that is usually missed is engagement. And this is what we were talking about with influencers. And you need to have a range of different types of influencers. In fact, we have 5 different types of influencers. But you need people that are like giving you advice, and people who are going to be out there spreading the word, and people who are in the project that are the champions to help engage your executives and stakeholders. So as you move through your change, make sure that you not only have a really great communication plan that's multifaceted and a training plan that includes live components, but also make sure that you have a really robust strategy around engagement, because engagement is actually where the change occurs. And that all 3 of these need to continue post go live. I tell people all the time, change actually only really starts at go live, because people can talk a big talk, walk a big walk before go live. But until they're actually in the system, you're not going to know if they're going to accept the change or not, or, not only in the system, but whatever go live is for you. It could be a merger and acquisition. It could be insourcing and outsourcing, whatever that key date is where the change takes effect. You need to make sure that these 3 things continue post that date. Okay. And then as a reminder, we talked about this earlier on, but when you think about change, you have to hit all 8 of these aspects. Again, people get focused on tech because digital transformation is such a big thing right now. But if you don't talk about how this culturally is going to change you, or if there's any impact on policy, or are your metrics changing, like how am I going to be measured on a day-to-day basis, it really falls flat. So make sure that when you're thinking about the change that's going on for your initiative, you think about all of these parameters and you speak to all of these parameters as you're going out and having the conversations and engaging. So let me go on here to the next one. And then the last thing, I'm checking my time. Okay, so I have a couple other tips for you after this, but the last thing on the slides that I'll give you today is building a foundation for change. So Michelle, you were talking about building a business case right now. Let's just say that gets approved. The next thing that you're going to need to do is build a foundation for change, which most people skip. And I blame that on a lot of the system integrators because they want to go right into design before you've had some of these conversations. And it doesn't provide you a really great foundation for the change. So you need to build a case for change. And what does that look like? Those 8 parameters that I was just showing you on one of the last slides, you need to decide as a company, which of those 8 are you actually going to rely on for your implementation? So as an example, I was at a company the other day, well, it was months ago, but I walked into their door and we were having this your case for change conversation. And they said that they wanted to go 100% PO backed for their P2P implementation. And I said, that's awesome. I've done it before. It can be done. Totally on board. Well, so we get around to the policy piece of the conversation. And the leader in the room said, absolutely not. We're not going to be able to change policy. To change a policy around here, it takes an act of God. Okay. Well, if that's the case, and if you guys want to be 100% PO backed, that means you need to rely more on your process and your process design around how to create that environment and your culture and your metrics. But we can't rely on policy to drive that change forward. So I hope that explains kind of how you build your case for change. It's really talking about out of those 8 things, what levers are you going to pull to be able to create the change that you want? You need to also identify success metrics. And this is not like the ROI that you said that you were going to get on the project. This is to identify, is the project successful or not? So sometimes it's things like 100% PO backed or adoption rates or the savings that you have achieved from the project or the hours that you've reduced or anything like that. You need to have like 5 to 6 different metrics on any given change that you're trying to drive forward. So as you are going through hard times on the project, because there always will be hard times, you need to rely on those success metrics to go out to the organization and say, no, we're actually making progress. I know it seems hard, but based off of what we all committed to, we're actually not that far off to where we were hoping to be. Or sometimes, like in my case with the rogue influencer that I was talking about earlier, who was going out to finance and drumming up all of these stories, I luckily had my success metrics and I was able to go back out to those CFOs and the finance community and say, look, we all agreed to were our success metrics for the project, and we're actually exceeding all of those metrics. So let's have a different conversation about where maybe the metrics aren't covering and how we can help you be more effective in this system. So it's kind of a great backstop to have when things get a little bit muddy on the project. Develop your key messages. This is going back to the story. You have to have a story to tell. It's not like I had a client tell me once, well, we're doing this implementation because everyone else is. That's not a good story. Like you have to have what is the problem that we're solving? Why are we solving it now? If this has been like this for 10 years, why is it critical that we need to solve this now? And then in that story, you also have to describe what's not changing. You know, this is like your comforter, the blanket, like what people like to go back to is what's not changing because that gives them comfort at the end of the day. So make sure when you're developing that key message that you have both. Go ahead.
Sorry, you were frozen. Can you just go over that one more time?
Develop key messages. So your key messages should include what the problem is, why are you doing it now, and how you're going to solve for it, obviously. But then also what's not changing. I like to use my girls as an example. They still have their baby blankets, and we've moved around a lot as a family. Those baby blankets are their comfort. Like that's something that has never changed for them. So you need to give your people that level of comfort to know that yes, things are changing, but here's what's not going to change. Did you?
Thank
was that
you.
good? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for letting me know that. So
Yes.
assessing risks is another one. Like you do this right out of the gate, and these are change related risks. So I'll give you an example of like, are your senior leaders actually supporting you as true sponsors, or are they just saying that they are? There's a difference. Are there a lot of other initiatives going on that conflict with this initiative? Are we low on resources as a project team? All of those risks you need to mitigate through a really great change management strategy. So assessing risk as part of the foundation, and then determining the influencers, which we already talked about. So that's your foundation for change. And I always recommending doing all of these things before you go into design, because it gives you those foundations that you're going to need to have throughout the project. Okay, so we have 10 minutes left. That was like a really, really fast 50 minutes for me. I hope it was for you too. I'm not hopefully this was entertaining and valuable at the same time. But I do like to have a good amount of time for any questions that might be popping up. I see some stuff in chat. Not sure if those are questions or not, but would love to have the opportunity to answer any of the questions you might have on change management, anything that we talked about today, digital transformation, etc. So the floor is now yours.
Any questions? Just come on off mute and ask Amanda.
Questions, but I thought this was a really great presentation. Thank you for all the great information.
You are welcome. Anything
Thanks
else?
for the information, Amanda. Very good. Thank you. No questions at this end.
You are welcome. You can tell I have a lot of passion for change, like and procurement. So
We're actually going through changes right now with implementing Coupa. So that has been very interesting. But like you said, we have to be open for changes.
yeah, I've implemented now Coupa 10 times. 10,
Oh, really?
10 or 11 times. Yeah. So
Looking forward to it. We just kicked it off, not this week. So looking forward to that.
Yes. Awesome.
Amanda, what is the best way for everybody to connect with you? Should it be LinkedIn?
So I think I ended my presentation a little bit early. Yeah, LinkedIn is the best way, Kathy. So if you're on LinkedIn, please look me up. Otherwise, I'm going to just drop my email in here. If anyone's going through a change right now and they just want to vent, even, I'm here for you. I take a lot of those calls from people across procurement. And they're like, oh, I just don't know what to do, or it's not going well. So I'm happy to take any of those calls too.
Amanda's great.
Thank you.
She's fantastic. And I will put your email and also your LinkedIn in the follow-up email out to everybody.
Awesome.
So don't worry, I'll pass on your information.
Good. Great. Well, I appreciate this group today. I think Kathy, we've done a couple of these now. This is a nice large group that was on the call today. So, kudos to all of you for making the time for continuous improvement and learning today.
Thank you, Amanda. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Amanda. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Did you want to
Amanda.
say anything else, Leanna, before we end?
No, Amanda, again, thank you. I feel like change management isn't always doesn't have to always be for large changes. It could be for smaller changes too. So
Yep.
we can use this in our day-to-day
Yes.
lives. So thank you. It's
You're welcome.
refreshing.
You're welcome. Awesome. Well, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
You too, everyone. Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Leanna. Bye-bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.